And how is it to notice that in the body of how it feels to be together? And so as we begin our interaction, I invite us maybe just to share a word in the chat, or maybe there's an emoticon that we can find. Maybe that's helpful as a way of representing how we're feeling. Maybe we're feeling joyful or easeful or a bit nervous. What would be one word to describe here and now how we're doing? One emoticon. Okay, great. So warm, zombie. Oh, I hadn't heard that one before. Comfy, arriving, sleepy, present, butterflies in the stomach. Yeah, a bit sleepy, grounded, neutral. Great. Great. Curious, light. Yeah. Good. Balanced. Mepare also joining us from Turkey is my team member. Sleepy. And let's just continue this awareness practice a few more moments. Like, how is it to notice how people are sharing? What does it do to our system? What happens in our hearts, in our bodies, as we notice how everybody else is doing? And I invite you to write one word about that. What's that reaction? What's that experience of noticing all these different check-ins that we're describing? How does that affect us? It's activating. Yeah. It's comforting. Yeah. It makes you curious, centering. Great. So lots of different experiences. Some maybe more positive, some maybe more challenging, insecure, awake. Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Connecting, pleasant, connecting. Yeah. And so we are right now part of this superorganism of this event. And every one of our sharings is a way of informing how we're doing. So I really appreciate your authenticity and just candidly sharing. And I look forward to a bit more participation also during the course of this session. If you have questions or comments, this is a fantastic start. So I really already thank you all for your participation. All right. So I'll begin the slideshow. Okay, so I founded this NGO in Switzerland. I've been trained as a clinician and worked in humanitarian emergencies for a number of years, and then also working in clinical practice, individual and group work, and work quite closely for some time with Irvin Yalom, and now we're being supervised by Molin Lech, who I'm sure many of you know from the AGPA. And our approach really focuses on having an evolutionary conceptual framework to be able to build resiliency and empowerment in our group. And so it's a little bit different than psychopathological clinical treatment. It's more sort of a broad base to a broader population of people, but nevertheless includes key aspects of clinical practice. And so in this conference, we'll go over a very brief brush strokes of our 14 billion years of our evolution. We'll explore some dynamics of how that perhaps gives a certain way of understanding the therapeutic alliance, which is the most important dynamic in terms of holding the clinical space for our clients to get better. The dynamic of neuroception and the polyvagal theory from Stephen Porges, which will then give us some very specific elements to zoom in on the therapeutic presence as one of the components of the therapeutic alliance. And finally, we'll explore, in terms of group work, how this nervous system information can help us to conceive of the group as a superorganism, as a unified self, a larger, extended version of our individual physiological self. So 14 billion years ago, we had this Big Bang, scientists, so physicists tell us, and then the Earth was born about 4 billion years ago, 4.5 billion years ago. And then life came over. Suddenly, these incredible mixes of chemistry and biophysiological energies into unified single organisms. And those organisms became more complex as evolution unfolded, with eukaryotes and then plants in the ocean and plants on Earth, on the planet. Fungi, and then the Cambrian explosion about 500 million years ago really was an incredible leap in terms of the complexity of organismic life on the planet, with more specific sensory capacities in eyes and ears and arms. All sorts of organs started to develop, which then brought more and more emphasis and more capacity for the emergence of amphibians, reptiles, and finally social life, with mammals really being again like another one of those evolutionary leaps, and us humans being at the sort of the edge of evolution there. Although, of course, it's very important to keep in mind that this particular diagram describes, puts the humans here, but it's not necessarily that we're the best. It's just that there's a certain cognitive complexity and a way of adaptation that we've had that perhaps brings us to a higher level of understanding than other species, but we all have lots of elements in common, and respect for all of life is really essential. And so in terms of our therapeutic factors, one of the things that we're seeing in this evolutionary trajectory is that life becomes more and more social. And that as life becomes more social, it also becomes more capable. It also becomes more adaptive. The species that is dominating the bottom of the earth are the ants. Some of you may have heard of E.O. Wilson's work, who just died recently, a biologist at Harvard, who's done incredible research and found out that actually the ants make up about half of the entirety of life on the planet, and without them, life could not function. And so they are a very social species. They're super social species, eusocial species, as he called them. And this sociality, this way of relating, really has been at the core of how we've been able to increase our survival chances. And in therapy, this is particularly important and has been shown to be a key principle through work in particular from Wampold, but also many others, described as the common factors approach, and really specifying the importance of the alliance, specifying the importance of a strong quality of attunement, a bond in the relationship. And that's also described as agreeing on the therapy goals and practices. And we're not going to pay so much attention to that today. And just very briefly to let you know what the other factors are in terms of success based on this common factors paradigm. The technique of therapy is only half as important. We have about 30% here, by the way. I don't know if I can make notes. Yeah. This is relevant to about 30%. Specific technique is about 15%, explaining the variance of success in therapy. placebo 15%. So that's the ideas that a client might have on how good the therapy is or how good you are at your work. And extra therapeutic factors is also a really interesting dynamic in the sense that a lot of people get better in therapy, not necessarily because of what happens in therapy, but more because of what they're able to transfer into their daily life. So the integration of insights and experiences. And again, we can talk about the quality of embodiment, having strong experiences in therapy then allows for that to be embodied in their daily life. So the experiential quality, the embodied quality in the therapy really is relevant. So this is the polyvagal theory, which describes really, again, from the point of view of evolution, how we have developed more and more ways of being intelligent, more and more ways in which we've been able to escape threats, more and more ways in which we've been able to increase our chances of survival in the face of challenge. And so from Stephen Porges, we've learned that around 400 million years ago, we had a freeze nervous system state, which we might know as, for example, the salamander. These little lizards that walk on the road. It's like if you watch them or if they see you moving, then they'll just stop, right? And it's an involuntary response. It's not a response that's voluntary. And that just helps them stay put until the danger goes away. And then they can keep living their lives. Later on, we developed this fight and flight responses to threat. And there's some recent data showing that actually we developed first a flight response and then a fight response, which also has some consequences in terms of how to do therapy, but we won't go into that today. Just to say that there's these threat systems. These are the 3 threat systems. And there's also fawn we could put here, some of you might have heard of, which are ways in which our clients are going to be in therapy, in the group. People are going to be experiencing fight, flight, and freeze. And the key point to understand from the polyvagal theory is that they will experience this state to the extent that they don't feel safe. So lack of safety will increase the chances of going into fight, flight, freeze states in the moment. And one of the ways in which we evaluate whether we feel safe or not is this quality called neuroception. Put it in the chat there. Neuroception, which is an extremely rapid neurobiological scanning of the environment that happens below the capacity of awareness, and that is constantly looking at whether we feel safe in the environment or not. And so the extent to which we can create an environment of safety in the group space is going to have a direct impact on how much our clients are experiencing fight, flight, and freeze. And that's a very different sort of assumption or postulate from thinking that if they experience fight, flight, and freeze, there's something wrong with them, or there's something that's pathological. Like maybe we're doing something, or maybe we're not doing something in the space that is stimulating a state of fight, flight, and freeze, which then, of course, may be amplified and resonate deeply through history of trauma or developmental issues or a particular challenge that they're going through. But that the quality of the space that we're creating really has a huge influence in terms of how we work. And so further on in our evolution, we got to develop this orientation system, which happened mostly, which began to happen through the Cambrian explosion in our capacity to have more like eyes and just hear in the environment. And then social engagement. And social engagement really is this exciting state where we're curious, where we're playful, where we're able to enjoy, right? If you remember, I was inviting you in the beginning of the session to just take a notice and see if there was something to enjoy in your space, in your body. And really then encouraging for that, what we call internal social engagement system at the neurobiological level into our own bodily experience, which then of course ripples into how we are together here. Maybe there's more chances of you being able to enjoy this conference if you're in an enjoyable state, which also perhaps mean that I don't have to be so brilliant, but I won't take that on myself. So, and maybe I am quite brilliant anyway, so you wouldn't need to be enjoyable. I'll let you do the evaluation. You'll receive one at the end of the conference. So our therapeutic alliance really is relying on our capacity for our own capacity of orientation and social engagement. So let's do a little exercise of orientation right now and just check through, see if we can embody that. Just, it's going to last about 1 minute. Okay. So we're here right now, just in this moment. And I invite us to let our eyes go where they want to go. Just letting the eyes go completely free. Maybe just like we're watching on the screen and seeing who's here. Or maybe we're feeling like broadening the space. There's something in our room that feels interesting. We're allowing the involuntary impulse to let the eyes go where they want to go. And perhaps they have found a place in our room, in the screen, that's a little bit enjoyable. They chose to go there. And what's that like? To just stay a few moments there, letting your eyes go where they want to go. And enjoy that. And maybe there isn't something to enjoy. Maybe it feels sort of neutral or even a bit tense, and that would be okay too. So let's hear from some of you right here, right now. Like, how was that? Just to take, a 45-second pause and orienting into the space. If you write one word again, maybe in the chat, like what does that do to us? Yeah, it's comforting. It's nice, it's pleasant. Yeah. So it's overall pretty positive felt sense experience, it seems. Freedom even, yeah, wonderful. Yeah. Yeah, there's more connection in the screen, seem to be open, a sense of grounding, being grateful, curious. What's it? Openness, connecting, softening, relief. Perfect. So all the things we're describing right here are really a proof, in a way, that our social engagement is online to some extent. Now, if there's only one thing you remember from the polyvagal theory, it's this. To the extent that our orientation and social engagement system is online, to that same extent, our fight, flight, freeze states are not online. There is an inversely proportionate logic in our neurobiological resources whereby we just cannot be overwhelmed by fight, flight, freeze if we have a strong social engagement system online. And so the key is, well, how can we bring in this quality of interest and curiosity? And I think generally psychodynamic theories and approaches are very good in bringing that into the group space. And yet perhaps there's less emphasis on enjoyment and ease and playfulness. And so maybe we can see how we can bring in some of these dynamics to increase the state, the nervous system state of social engagement at the group level. So I gave you here a definition of neuroception as a neural evaluation of risk and safety. And this risk and safety triggering either our fight, flight, freeze systems or orientation and social engagement system. It really is kind of a binary bifurcation moment in each moment that we're doing, always assessing implicitly out of our awareness. And so Porges has this nice sort of succinct sentence in his latest 2022 article, where he says, instead of "I think, therefore I am," which is the Cartesian cogito ergo sum, he says, "I feel myself." and therefore I am. And one of the great challenges about fight, flight, and freeze and fawn, if we include that one as well, is that they have much less, it's much less easy to access these states. It's much more enjoyable, and therefore the body is much more accessible as well through social engagement and orientation. So we won't spend a long time here, but just for those of you who are really interested in the specifics of neurobiology, the social engagement system really engages a lot of these dynamics physiologically in terms of in our face, in our throat, larynx, pharynx, everything that you're watching inside of me right now as I'm interacting with you is influencing your neuroceptive information. And so as therapists, when we're in the group, the way in which we are and our capacity to be oriented in social engagement is one of the information. In fact, before the group goes beyond the authority phase in their maturity in the group process, the influence of how they interpret our signals non-verbally has a huge impact on their state. So that quality of therapeutic presence, which we're going to go into in a moment, is very important. So here we have all of the different states which I described earlier, except that they're now presented a little bit differently. And here we have the felt sense or the feeling tone of each of these states. So we have very positive for social engagement, right? Playfulness, enjoyment. Then we have, sort of low social engagement. Orientation tends to be neutral, but through mindfulness, through the awareness of the experience, then there's this very easy access to pleasant sensation that emerges from that. Then there's these more challenging states. Of fight and flight, and then even freeze. And freeze tends to be a bit more neutral. Freeze is a state of dissociation. It's a state of fragmentation. It's a state that involuntarily we are disconnecting ourselves from the situation, and that helps us feel less. And so the lessened sensation of a freeze state helps make it more neutral and more livable, even though, of course, it has its consequences later on. And so as we begin a group, very oftentimes, there's going to be a lot of freeze. There's going to be a lot of people who are perhaps, very stuck. They're not feeling very free. They're feeling constrained. They're not sure who the others are. So, there's a sense of stuckness. Maybe there's a sense of wanting to get away, shyness, anxiety. These are typical of flight states. Fight then, comes on. This is also in particular in what I mentioned to the authority phase in relationship to the group process, a sense of perhaps being angry, or a lower threshold of that would just be if someone feels very different to what happened to something that was shared in the group. So there's a sense of differentiation, and that difference of opinion or difference of experience can sometimes be a little bit electric, a little bit tense. So it's our role to be able to contain those moments and to help the whole group continue through this trajectory whereby difference is welcome, and then inviting orientation and social engagement. And in particular, in terms of the trajectory of, before I go into that, this last piece here is that once we've established a strong sense of social engagement in the group, and I'll share in a moment some specific tools and possibilities of how to do that. Once we have done that, once there is a strong sense of curiosity and a strong sense of trust also and safety in the group, then the freeze and the flight and the fight, they also come online, and they're of course very welcome, and yet they will be experienced personally, internally, very differently. So if you are, let's say you've had a full day, and you're coming into the group, and one of the first things that happens into the group is that someone else shares something that makes you feel even more anxious. Has that ever happened to us? If that's not happening in a group, maybe it's happened at home. You know, we're coming home, we're tired, and then our partner, our husband, or our child, they have their own issues, and then it's like one more. Because of the little capacity we have, we're going to be, you know, a lot more, it's going to be a lot more difficult to really handle that tension. And so from a nervous system perspective, what we want to do is to bring as much social engagement capacity in the group as possible before we go into the deep challenges of trauma and developmental issues and lots of like really strong pathologies. Because that sort of developmental move towards capacity first is really going to help us deal with these issues without making them a lot worse or a lot more tense or a lot more traumatizing for the whole group than would be necessary. So what we're working on, the concept here is the concept of constraints, where in the beginning, we want to have strong constraints from this model, from this approach. Constraints meaning, I'll give you a specific example of how we started this session. Do you remember how we started this session? I proposed a little meditation. And that was a super strong constraint, right? I wasn't inviting anyone to share. I wasn't saying any content. I was just really like, we're going to take a few moments in silence and see if we can welcome ourselves. And really inviting a sense of internal social engagement as a priming for external social engagement. And over the longer term of the group trajectory, if we have time, we'll get into it today. And we're going to see that in the beginning of a new group, we also want to have those strong constraints in a way that still feels safe and in a way that doesn't feel like people feel excluded or overly excluded. But just to say that we want to be able to hold the tension, the arousal, the sympathetic arousal, technically from a nervous system perspective, that sympathetic arousal is well contained enough so that it can be processed and integrated, rather than to have sort of outbursts, you know, of intensity that maybe sometimes take weeks or even months or years to really recover from. Ideally, from a nervous system perspective, we'd be able to titrate, is another term we use, titrate the intensity so that there is only as much intensity brought into the group as they can handle. Now, of course, that's an impossible calculation, really. It's like in the perfect world, this would always happen, and it doesn't happen like that in groups, obviously. But it is something to aim for. Is the group ready for this? And do we as facilitators need to intervene a little bit more? Or perhaps trusting. And that trust is also a way for the group to feel empowered into the movement towards social engagement and resiliency. So from the Therapeutic Alliance perspective, what I want to make an emphasis here today is that we as therapists are able to be oriented and socially engaged to the extent that we can. Of course, we're human. So sometimes, you know, we have our group on a day where it's difficult or a moment where we just had an argument. And over time, clients can then embody those states of orientation and social engagement, which will have been modeled by the Therapeutic Alliance, therapeutic presence in particular, and the embodiment of those qualities, which are a sense of feeling grounded in the moment, a sense of enjoying or being curious, a sense of being playful. All of that will help them to be able to negotiate the charge of these very intense states of freeze, you know, or pathology, which are often linked to pathology. So in terms of modeling this quality of therapeutic presence, we have the facilitator here, and then we have our client. Of course, there will be more than one in a group. And the idea is that we are oriented and socially engaged and really have worked on that. I mean, that's not going to happen right in the moment of the group. That's from a nervous system perspective, that will require a lot of our own personal training, like doing mindfulness, doing body-oriented approaches, taking on really a deep sensitivity to our emotional arousal, to the changes in our own nervous system states, and then that being able to offer a nonverbal, implicit, sort of right brain modeling for our clients to be able to embody over the weeks and months and years that we spend with them. And in the beginning, they will be in fight and flight and freeze. Oftentimes, in the very beginning, most people who come see us will be in those spaces. And eventually they can learn to embody that and be oriented and socially engaged themselves. So in terms of therapeutic presence, Geller and Porges have done a nice little article there describing some specific factors, which is really basically a translation of the unconditional positive regard or the humanistic principles, Rogerian principles, into in an embodied form. So we are looking at soft facial expressions. Sorry. And these will be totally obvious, by the way. I don't expect anybody to be shocked or to have a deep insight, in terms of what those are. But using our gestures, maybe the way in which we use our gestures or the way we don't use our gestures. I was with a client yesterday in a pre-group interview, and she was talking about how she felt put down by her education system and having to feel sitting still in a chair without moving. And that was exactly how I was. I was just sitting in, and so she was saying that, obviously, I was noticing, well, okay, are you talking about me? Are you talking about your experience? All this process was inside. But and we did get to a very strong alliance by the end of the session. But one of the things that we do, and you'll notice this in the demos I'll show in a few moments, in our approach. Hi, Rebecca, welcome. I didn't see you there. Rebecca is also a team member in Turkey. One of the things that we do in our, well, you see, Rebecca just did that. So the sense of putting the hand on the heart and the sense of really feeling and showing also visually maybe that we're feeling something inside. And we have all sorts of other hand signals, like we do this as a way of celebrating something that somebody says. We have this one, which is a way of really encouraging and really pushing forward. You see, like some of you have smiles on this, like it kind of looks nice, doesn't it? Evolutionarily, these were very important to find out how others were doing and whether we're accepted or not. And it is true that on Zoom in particular, it's quite challenging to get that very similar embodied sense. So that I think there's something particularly to pay attention to there. But even in a room, even in a room, like I've found myself, throwing hearts. Which ones have there been? Oh yeah, Rebecca, thanks. There's this one, which is, I agree with you, or me too. It's like, this has happened to me as well. And I invite you, we can all be creative, obviously, but these nonverbal gestures really help. Like, I'm very sure, of course, I'm not completely sure, but I'm very sure that you've just had a different evaluation of me going a little bit crazy and funky with my sort of stupid hand signals than before I did them. Maybe I'm a little bit more approachable. I'm a little bit more accessible. It feels a little bit more relaxing and safe to be with me. Or maybe it's the opposite. That can happen too. It's much more rare, but it can happen as well. And then we can bring that in the room. Okay, so, it makes me think that you're with a child facilitator and you feel like actually you have no place to be here. And maybe there's some authority dynamic to be included in the group. So gestures, an open posture, and finally prosodic vocalizations. So that was obviously very important, and there's a lot of data for children. So we won't go into more examples in relationship to these four here, but I'd like to go into perhaps how to bring in one or two sentences in groups to psychoeducate our clients in terms of this nervous system approach and how we can build more and more social engagement capacity for the group to become self-organized and the facilitators not having to do so much containment in the process. So I'm just wondering, is there any, I didn't see any questions in the chat, but maybe there are questions at this point before I go into the demo. I'm welcome to take a few minutes now if we like. It always takes a courageous one to start off. What does prosodic mean? Yeah, prosody is the sound of the voice. So as I was beginning the meditation in the beginning of the session, I intentionally spoke with a little bit of a softer voice. And just now I've shifted it as well. Because I get very excited about all this material, I start speaking fast and I speak at higher pitch and all of that. But in a group, I would speak like that as well. I think, for us to think that a lower, slower is better, I think that becomes obviously a little bit dogmatic, and it takes away from authenticity and spontaneity. So it's really important to take all of these things with a grain of salt. And actually, I would argue it's important to have a whole range of prosody. So we can be sometimes really slow and low. And at times we're going to want to be, powerful and speak loud and speak fast, because there's a lot of enthusiasm, and it's important to sort of meet the group with that energy, right? There's an arousal that's happening every moment, and our role is to be able to develop this quality of attunement. So we do that, and so prosody is really just the way we speak, rather than the words that we use. Yeah. Okay, well, if that was the only question on the whole theme, I'll move on then to our demo. So I'll share with you two demonstrations of online groups I did with Boo, who one was with Boo and another one was Danny, is another team member, just during the COVID crisis. We did a lot of online support. One of the extracts is very short, it's just 45 seconds, and it's a way of describing how to bring in this psychoeducation in the beginning of a group to explain the importance of safety. So I'll share with you now. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So here you have Boo, and then you have myself. And here we go, 45 seconds.
It's like at the beginning of, as we form this group, as we build a sense of safety and container together, it's just nice to know, how do we each operate? And actually what makes us feel each comfortable, and that we can each then be ourselves in this space.
I may become a little too comfortable, and if it's too disturbing to anyone, please do let me know.
So that was a key moment for me in that session, because it was the first moment in the whole session where we had everybody smiling. Everybody was smiling, and we all smiled because our dear participant there in the bottom right, they shared spontaneously something that was authentic, and obviously it was kind of a joke, but it was also very, very true. And what we have also here is a response of one participant of how my invitation for safety or comfort is landing, which is of course something we really want to pay attention to as well. Because that question may be very inviting and relaxing and increasing safety for a lot of people, but it may also, it's like, oh, I didn't even know I should feel safe, or that safety was a thing. And then actually it increases the arousal. So it's important to double check as we do that. What is the impact? How are people receiving that? Are they benefiting from it or not? And maybe one last thing about that the little demo is that when there is, especially in the beginning of the groups, when there are, you can see their social engagement system being online, and at least to some extent, right? They have a spontaneous smile, and what we can do to reinforce that is really to celebrate it. Like, wow, we just, this is the first moment in the whole group where everybody just spontaneously was laughing or enjoying. And this quality is really important for us to be able to welcome everything that's in the group. And in particular, in the beginning of the group, we want to do everything we can so that we can feel good together. And then from a place of relatively feeling good, at least, then we can welcome maybe the more challenging things, or even the most challenging things eventually. But we want to go there in a graduated way, and so we're containing the force of the group to be able to hold the charge, a sympathetic charge that comes through these sometimes very, very challenging sharings. So I'll share here now a second demo. This is with another team member. And I spent here a little bit, again, this is very early on in the first session of the group, a few moments describing this very similar principle of safety and psychoeducation. Word resiliency, because I've been trained in somatic psychology modalities. And the idea is to be able to bring in the wisdom of the body, wisdom of the nervous system, in the way in which we engage and we share together. Whatever experience that we're going through at any moment. So there's no planned topic, except to be ourselves, to feel like if we feel safe enough and comfortable enough to share, to maybe just explore what's going on inside ourselves within, the boundaries of this space with Danny and I, who are going to be facilitating this session together. And so with Danny, we're going to be teaming up to open up as much comfort and ease and joy so that we can connect with these different parts of ourselves and also connect with our bodies and become more intimate and hopefully journey, towards a bigger resiliency and a more intimate sense of who we are and how we can show more of ourselves in relationship. One of the invitations of the group.
I like the way you describe it. It makes me think of like a playground or a sandbox for grown-ups. like around and kind of get to know each other and yeah.
That's right. So I'm looking forward to our first wrestles. Whoever is ready for a jump. So again, you can see here, first 5 minutes, a whole group smile, seems quite authentic. Obviously, sometimes smiling is not authentic and it's a way of being nervous. And there most probably still is a huge amount of nervousness in the group. This is just the first few minutes. And yet with Danny, I was personally encouraging a sense of teaming up together. And so he modeled that. He modeled that by being playful with me. And so our playfulness as co-facilitators really then allowed for a different quality of space for participants to be a part of and join in. So that's also something we can do when we co-facilitate with another person. Just to say, we also had an experience recently where the modeling or the experience of a close co-facilitation team also had a negative impact on one of the participants. They felt that they were excluded. They felt that there was this really intimate, cool, connected sort of dyad there, and they felt outside. So again, we want to be able to take time and really notice and welcome different reactions and sometimes challenging reactions to these more positive arousals. And yet, from a nervous system perspective, we absolutely want to make sure that we celebrate and we encourage and we go forward and really value all of the positive affect that comes in the sessions. Because as we described earlier, and let me just show the slide again, because this is really at the core of the autonomic nervous system dynamics that are at play in our approach. To the extent that we've developed these more positive states, these more joyful, easeful, playful states, and embodied them first as therapists, and then as clients gradually develop that, then we're able to negotiate and able to embody and really express and explore all of these more challenging fight, freeze, threat, traumas and difficult situations that we have experienced or are currently experiencing in a way that is much more skillful, in a way that is much more integratable. I know that's not an English word, but it facilitates this transition to integration and embodiment, which links back to one of the key aspects of what is successful in therapy. And I'll share that again, just to make the full loop in terms of where we were at, which is that if strong experiences in the therapy session can be easily felt without too much resistance, without too much intense, overwhelming intensity. It can be very intense, but not overwhelmingly intense. Then that really offers a very powerful doorway for our clients to be able to integrate all of these experiences within the therapeutic context into their daily lives. And that is that transferential dynamic is a hugely important dynamic of how we work. So we want to have strong experiences, and we want to be able to build gradually the container for that, including a lot of positive emotion, playfulness, curiosity, and modeling from therapeutic presence. And then we go eventually, as is possible. It's never really completely possible. I mean, there's always non-linear issues, and that's just a part of the humanity of the group, and that can also be very welcomed into the process. So I had one more little extract to show from the demo. 45 seconds. Let's do that then. Uh, 39 to 06. Okay, so this is later on in the session, one participant sharing their experience.
Yeah.
I think that is the biggest luxury, of safety. If you feel that much safe, you can exclude yourself, that you know that you're not going to be judged or anything. That's the biggest luxury of being held by the group, I guess. I think.
Definitely, I agree.
Okay, so you can see there one participant feeling more safe, and also appreciating how safety allows for them to be able to come into the group in their own rhythm. And what you can also see is two participants starting to embody themselves those nonverbal signals, and really participating with an attunement capacity to the sharing of that participant. And so they are starting to the process is being embodied, and that would only grow further and further, such that facilitators need to intervene and be present less and less, because there's more and more capacity in the group. So maybe I have just one last slide about that particular movement, which I think is interesting from a nervous system perspective again. And I'll end with that. So on this axis, we have group differentiation. So the higher we go on this spectrum, the more differentiated we have a group, and that's a really good thing. I mean, there's a necessary there's a need for greater differentiation as the process evolves. And then on this spectrum, we have group coherence. And so the more we go further on this spectrum, the more coherent the experience is for the whole group. And so what usually happens, or one of the ways in which we work from a nervous system perspective, is to have co-facilitators. We have the co-facilitators, and then you have somebody sharing in the beginning of a group, just like you did. You shared a lot about how you were doing in the moment. And I could have done, a vertical inquiry, going down, joining you, asking, who else is feeling similar. I mean, many of you did share similar feelings. So many of you probably did feel to some extent joined in your experience. And here's just another example of that. And as there are, very similar feelings, similar experiences, obviously we also want to explore other experiences, because we know that in a group there will be, many different ways of engaging. So what we want then is to encourage the differentiation and be able to celebrate it and to invite it. And from a nervous system perspective, it's a shift from reciprocity to separation. It's a little bit like the separation of the baby from the mother and starting to grow themselves. And that's often quite a tense process, to have a wider spectrum of possibilities in a group. But the benefit of that, of course, in terms of coherence, is that we go from needing to be the same to being ourselves and being all very different. And so there's a gradual process we really want to encourage as much as possible, where we start with at least some level of joining, so that each participant, every sharing they make, that they feel joined. And from that basis, once they have that trust and the sense of embodied safety that what they will say is at least joined to some extent, then you can grow on the spectrum of differentiation, which is often more difficult, and increase the quality of authenticity in the group. So we're coming to the end of our time here, my friends. I really appreciated lots of nonverbal contacts, and even though it's very early for some of you, your presence. We do have maybe 2 minutes before we close. Is there any reactions or comments or questions that you'd like to ask? This is a last moment together. Okay, well, let me ask make some community inquiry. Oh, okay, we have a hand up there. Yes, please.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, we're all good.
I would like to thank you for this presentation. It was really informative. My name is Dr. Asil Hamza. I'm from Saudi Arabia. I'm currently a psychiatrist and also on my way to a degree to have a master's in physiology. I'm interested in the part that you kindly demonstrated that the authentic participation of the group participant can have an impact on the autonomic nervous system. Could you put some more light on that, please? I think your mic is closed.
Yes, thank you very much. Great question. And in 1.5 minutes, the dynamics between authenticity and nervous system dynamics. A big part of feeling safe is not having to inhibit our responses. Feeling safe means we don't have to watch out for how, the way we are is going to impact others. And that's a big thing in a group, right? The big thing in the group is what are others going to think when I am this way? And so the more authentic we can be, the more we don't have to inhibit our own responses, the more we can let our impulses flow through naturally. And hopefully we'll have built a non-judgmental environment. And that non-judgmental environment, through the humanistic principles of Rogers, like which I described, unconditional
acceptance. Positive acceptance.
Thank you. Great. Congruence and empathy, then we can just allow our bodies to be as they are. That's one of the most energy consuming things. Thank you, Nancy. Unconditional positive regard. Exactly. That's one of the most energy consuming things in our nervous system that increases our neuroceptive state of threat. Remember, neuroception is this involuntary, very quick evaluation of the environment, of whether it's safe or unsafe. And when we cannot be ourselves, we are increasing neuroceptive perception for threat. It's like our system is wired, it's hypervigilant for threat. And so the more we can be ourselves, the less that system is stimulated for threat states. That would be the relationship. Okay, I did it in 1.5 minutes, everyone. So I wish you a lovely rest of the conference. Feel free to contact me or our team, neurosystemics.org. I can put it in the chat.
Can I just say, first of all, thank you. This was really wonderful. Can we get the slides?
Of course. Yeah, they are quite brilliant. And I really look forward you to benefit from all this wisdom. And if you have any criticism or anything's wrong, feel free to share as well. I would love to learn. Thank you, Emily. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.